The Greys are extraterrestrial beings. They are frequent subjects of close encounters and alien abduction claims. The details of such claims vary widely, but typically, Greys are described as being human-like, with small bodies with smooth, gray-colored skin, enlarged, hairless heads, and large black eyes. Greys are typically depicted as gray-skinned, diminutive, humanoid beings that possess reduced forms of or completely lack external human body parts such as noses, ears, or sex organs. Their bodies are usually depicted as being elongated, having a small chest and lacking in muscular definition and visible skeletal structure. Their legs are depicted as being shorter and jointed differently from humans, with limbs proportionally different from a human. They are depicted as having unusually large heads in proportion to their bodies, with no hair on the body, and no noticeable outer ears or noses, sometimes with small openings or orifices for ears, nostrils, and mouths. In drawings, Greys are almost always shown with very large, opaque, black eyes. They are frequently described as shorter than average adult humans. The origins of the Grey alien may go back to the late 19th century. In 1891, the novel Meta, A Tale of the Future was published by Kenneth Follingsby, in which the narrator encountered small, gray-skinned aliens with balloon-shaped heads. In 1893, H.G. Wells presented a description of humanity's future appearance in the article The Man of the Year Million, describing humans as having no mouths, noses, or hair, and with large heads. In 1895, Wells also depicted the Eloi, a successor species to humanity, in similar terms in the novel The Time Machine. Aleister Crowley described a meeting with a preternatural entity named Lam that was similar in appearance to a modern Grey. Crowley believed he had contacted the entity through a process that he called Amalantrith workings, which he thought allowed humans to contact beings from outer space and across dimensions. Other occultists and ufologists, many of whom have retroactively linked Lam to later Grey encounters, have since described their own visitations from him, with one describing the being as a cold, computer-like intelligence and utterly beyond human comprehension. In 1933, the Swedish novelist Gustav Sandgren, using the pen name Gabriel Linde, published a science fiction novel in which he describes a race of extraterrestrials who wore clothes made of soft gray fabric and were short with big bald heads and large, dark gleaming eyes. The novel, aimed at young readers, included illustrations of the imagined aliens. This description would become the template upon which the popular image of gray aliens is based. The conception remained a niche one until 1965, when newspaper reports of the Betty and Barney Hill abduction made the archetype famous. Betty and Barney Hill were an American couple who claimed they were abducted by extraterrestrials in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire from September 19th to the 20th of 1961. It was the first widely publicized report of an alien abduction in the United States. According to a variety of reports given by the Hills, the alleged UFO sighting happened about 10:30 p.m. September 19th, 1961. The Hills were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls in Montreal, just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire. Betty claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky. The couple began to follow the object through an isolated stretch of road. About 1 mile south of Indian Head, they said that the object rapidly descended toward their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the road. The huge, silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevy Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. Barney, with a pistol in his pocket, stepped away from the car and moved closer to the object. Using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's windows, seeming to look at him. In unison, all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat-wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft approached to what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and 300 feet away from him. Barney tore the binoculars away from his eyes and ran back to his car. In a near hysterical state, he told Betty, "They're going to capture us." He saw the object again shift its location to directly above the vehicle. He drove away as fast as he could, telling Betty to look for the object. She rolled down the window and looked up. The Hills heard a rhythmic series of beeping and buzzing sounds, which they said seemed to bounce off the trunk of their vehicle. The car vibrated and a tingling sensation passed through the Hills' bodies. The Hills said that they experienced the onset of an altered state of consciousness that left their minds dulled. A second series of beeping or buzzing sounds returned the couple to full consciousness. They found that they had traveled nearly 35 miles south but had only vague, spotty memories of this section of the road. They recalled making a sudden, sharp, unplanned turn, encountering a roadblock, and observing a fiery orb in the road. Perplexed, the Hills say they tried to reconstruct the chronology of events as they witnessed the UFOs and drove home. But immediately after they heard the buzzing sounds, their memories became incomplete and fragmented. After being interviewed by psychiatrists, a common explanation given to the Hills is that the abduction was just a hallucination brought on by the stress of being an interracial couple in the early 1960s in the United States. After the Hills encounters, Greys would go on to become an integral part of ufology and other extraterrestrial-related folklore. In 1947, debris from a crashed aircraft was recovered near Roswell, New Mexico. It was not widely talked about until the 1970s when retired Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel said he believed the debris he retrieved was extraterrestrial. Ufologists began promoting a variety of increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories, claiming that one or more alien spacecraft had crash-landed and that the extraterrestrial occupants had been recovered by the military, which then engaged in a cover-up. Conspiracy theories about the event persist, and the Roswell incident continues to be of interest in popular media. The incident has been described as the world's most famous, most exhaustively investigated, and most thoroughly debunked UFO claim, but we will be covering this event extensively in a future video. The Greys are often involved in alien abduction claims. Among reports of alien encounters, Greys make up about 50% in Australia, 73% in the United States, 48% in continental Europe, and around 12% in the United Kingdom. These reports include distinct groups of Greys that differ in height. Abduction claims are often described as extremely traumatic, similar to an abduction by humans or even sexual assault in the level of trauma and distress. The emotional impact of perceived abductions can be as great as that of combat, sexual abuse, and other traumatic events. The eyes are often a focus on abduction claims, which often describe a Grey staring into the eyes of an abductee when conducting mental procedures. This staring is claimed to induce hallucinogenic states or directly provoke different emotions. The Greys are vastly referenced and shown in popular culture, with appearances in films, books, museums, and even their own cult following. There are people all around the world who believe in the existence of the Greys, and their presence still remains a mystery.